So in this video we will be taking a look at a scenario where everything goes perfect for Andalusia. This is the first video I am doing in this style, but if you want to see me do this type of video for other countries, please let me know. Anyway, let's get into the scenario. Andalusia, a country known for being a bit of a pushover. Throughout history, they have never exactly been treated like a global power. Even in World War II, as the fourth strongest country in the world, they got blasted around by the African Union. But what if this never happened? What if everything went perfect for this dark Cyan Iberian country? We begin in episode 13. Now, at this point, Andalusia has mostly recovered from the plague. They do still have some unemployment issues, however they are mostly doing good. Oh hey, look, here come the Romans. In episode 13, of course, the Great Mediterranean War took place, and Andalusia was the main battleground on the western front of the war. Now, this caused the nation to go into complete crisis after the war, as their infrastructure was mostly destroyed. To ensure that they can do better post-episode 13, we need to ensure they are more successful here. So, let's reverse just a bit. Now, right before the war took place, the Catalonians decided to join the Mediterranean bloc. This was very bad timing, as right as they joined, Rome launched their invasion, dragging Andalusia, and the whole Triangle Alliance for the matter, into the war. Now, to change this, we will see Rome decide to invade Catalonia earlier, ensuring that the Triangle Alliance does not get pulled into a war. This will give the Triangle Alliance valuable time to prepare, and Andalusia sets up many border defenses, also ensuring they guard the border with Galicia. In the exclave of the Farmers' Union, a group of Mesopotamian soldiers are doing their regular supply missions to move food into the exclave. However, these troops make a fatal mistake. In accordance with the supply treaty established after Rome invaded Blue Hungary, the Farmers' Union is allowed to move through Roman territory to supply the exclave, as long as they do not bring any weapons with them. However, these Mesopotamian troops forgot to leave their equipment in the exclave when they left. Midway through the crossing, right in the middle of Roman territory, a Roman scout group spots the soldiers with their weapons, and believe they are under attack. Due to this, they launch a surprise attack, chasing after the Mesopotamian troops. They do this for so long in fact, that by the time they catch up with the Mesopotamians, they have already crossed into mainland Farmerite territory. It is here where the Roman forces kill the Mesopotamian troops. The Farmers' Union finds out about this, reports it to Mesopotamia, and a war begins. Now, at first, the Star Alliance sees massive success. They quickly take out the Farmers' Union, as they were mostly supplied by Mesopotamia anyway, and move down to Constantinople. Now, while they hold out as best they can, Rhodes does eventually fall over to Mesopotamia. However, down south, Jeddah and Riyadh decide to join the war. This causes the Mesopotamians to have to fight a brutal two-front war on their own, as the Roman forces now cross the Bosphorus Strait. However, thankfully for Mesopotamia, the Triangle Alliance decides to join the war. Seeing the undefended Catalan border, the Triangle Alliance jumps on the opportunity to invade Rome. They quickly advance in, liberating Catalonia and storming towards the Alps. However, in a desperate move, Rome calls Galicia to join the war to distract the Triangle Alliance. The Galicians do decently, however, thankfully, the Andalusian border defenses hold strong, and they are quickly pushed back. Furthermore, Mesopotamia manages to defeat Jeddah and Riyadh with Egyptian help, although Egypt basically collapses when Sudan joins the war, so that sucks for them. Also, the Dutch decide to join the war to put an end to Rome, and also because the Mesopotamians promised a stupid amount of money to them. Combining these factors, the war is eventually won. Now, taking a look at the peace treaty here, most things are the same, however there are two main differences. The first is that instead of becoming an independent nation, Corsica becomes an Andalusian colony, as a thanks to the effort they put into the war. Also, Andalusia comes out of this war as a much stronger and more stable nation, which will be important very soon. Moving on a few episodes, we will be taking a look at the Americas. In our timeline, as of episode 18, the Andalusian American colony ended up looking like this. However, due to their increased power here, they are able to expand it to this much larger colony here, also bringing them in much more money. They will also continue to expand this much more later on. Moving over to Africa now, a pretty interesting event takes place. In our timeline, after the Mediterranean War, Morocco, which had previously broken away from Carthage, had seen increasing economical domination by Carthage, which eventually ended up with them uniting. However, here, we see the Andalusians, who are much stronger here, dominate over trade with Morocco, establishing many economical treaties, as they have a lot of ambitions with Africa. This eventually leads to Andalusia setting up a colony on the African coast, to connect with Morocco better. This angers Carthage a lot. Now, moving on to episode 21, we see that the royal families of Carthage and Morocco do still merge here, forming the African Union. However, the government, based in Carthage, makes a very big mistake. They immediately cut all trade deals with Andalusia on behalf of the Moroccan portion of the Union. This infuriates both Andalusia and many people of Morocco, as their economical situation immediately starts to decline. This eventually results in the early splitting of the Triangle Alliance, as the African Union is essentially kicked out, as Andalusia and Catalonia leave, and create a continuation of the alliance. Things stay calm for a while, but after the African Union discovers that Andalusia is secretly funding rebel groups in Morocco, they declare war. Carthaginian forces bombard the Andalusian coast off the Strait of Gibraltar. However, as the Andalusian navy is much better here than in our timeline, due to the need of it with maintaining their colony, they easily defeat Carthage and plan a landing. They decide to do it in their former colony, which the African Union invaded at the start of the war. Andalusian forces quickly land and take over the whole thing, and they then move into Morocco. The people of Morocco are in support of this, and before the Union even reaches its 2-year anniversary, Morocco breaks away, and after many advances, and a notable landing across Gibraltar, Carthage surrenders. In the peace treaty, Carthage is heavily weakened, and Andalusia also takes over Sardinia and Sicily, but since they don't want Sicily that much, they force Carthage to buy it back off them. Morocco also takes a lot of land, and Andalusia takes some North African land too. Moving back over to America, Andalusia heavily expands their colony, and with them taking over the Carthaginian colony in the peace treaty, they have full dominance over Brazil. As of episode 22, their colony looks something like this. Now, moving on to episode 23, it is here where we see the Amsterdam Conference take place. In our timeline, while the Andalusians still did get the largest colony of all, here, with their increased power and influence, they, along with Morocco, get much more land than they did in our timeline, even getting some more of the Congo, and more land down the coast. They managed to get Madagascar too. Now, on to World War I. The war plays out mostly the same, except for a very notable offensive that takes place. In our timeline, the Triangle Alliance mostly did nothing until the Dutch joined the war. However, here, the Andalusians managed to make a naval landing. This leads to the Dutch joining the war, as despite the fact that the militarized coast never was attacked, the Dutch still planned to join anyway, and they see this as the perfect moment. After the war, the Andalusians don't gain much, however they do ensure that Rome is fully killed off, as the old Montenegrin country is restored. Coming out of World War I, Andalusia is a strong power with much influence, and at this point I would say they are a competitor with China for place as the third strongest power in the world. Next up, we move on to World War II. The triangle block in this timeline now includes the Dutch, as the Andalusians had influenced the Dutch to do so after the war. Now, because of this, I actually think it is likely World War II never happens. With the Triangle Alliance being much stronger here, and with the Square Alliance never being able to recruit Rome, as they, well, don't exist, I imagine that the Square Alliance would see starting a war as too big of a threat. Another thing, the African Union does not exist too. It is here where I will split the world into two timelines. The first, the plan by the Russians will still take place in Poland, starting the war, and the second, the war never takes place, and a sort of Cold War happens, between the squares and triangles. We will cover timeline 1 first. So, the war begins as the Greeks are instructed to move into Old Empyrean soil to retake the Polish POWs. This results in a mini-skirmish taking place, starting the war. The war goes well for the Square Alliance at first. However, the sheer amount of forces on the side of the Triangle Alliance allows much pushback. The Square Alliance does manage to recruit Carthage and Galicia, however the Triangle Alliance combats this by recruiting New Persia and Caspia. Eventually, the war is won. Now, it is likely that the Chinese would still join the war. However, I imagine that after being sanctioned by the Triangle Alliance, and with the rest of their allies falling, they would surrender. The peace treaty is kind of hard to predict, but I feel something like this is realistic. After the war, it is very up to prediction of what would happen, but for sure the Andalusians would dominate a large portion of the world, as the second strongest country. Now, let's move on to what I believe is the more unrealistic scenario, which is a Cold War-style event taking place. Now, the reason I say this is more unrealistic is that the Square Alliance is fundamentally imperialist, therefore I imagine they would eventually start the Second World War. Now, this timeline is mostly boring, however I could imagine some interesting proxy wars taking place, as both sides try to gain influence. Nations I could see this happen in are India, Galicia, although they are mostly leaning towards the Square Alliance anyway, so we could just see them being invaded and split up instead, and we could also see a proxy war take place in Siberia. In the end, both of these timelines are up to interpretation, however in both, Andalusia is a strong power with a colonial empire that will leave a massive effect on history. That is going to be it for this video. After taking a short break from making alternate history scenarios, I am happy to announce I am back to regularly making them, so I hope you guys will still enjoy them. I have a few planned, and the next one will be about the upcoming war in episode 76 between Brazil and Carolina. But anyway, that is it. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.